We all know Iran for its ancient empires and intricate Persian carpets. But beneath those familiar images lie stranger wonders, beaches stained red by mineral rivers and salt lakes that sometimes glow pink. Imagine walking the Hormuz rainbow slopes, ducking into Kandovan's honeycombed cave homes, and watching Mount Taftan belch sulfur in a sky like winter lightning. On Hormuz Island, the Rainbow Mountains reveal layers of mineral-rich soils, iron oxide, manganese, and volcanic pigments that combine into stripes and hues rarely matched anywhere on Earth, producing landscapes that shift with light and tide. Do you know Hormuz's red beach is actually made of crushed iron oxide soils and tiny mineral fragments that locals have harvested for centuries and that change shade as the water and wind reshape them. The island's bands of ochre, crimson, sulfur yellow, and unexpected blues are the fingerprints of ancient volcanic eruptions, mixed with seaborne salts and intricate chemical reactions that painted the slopes over millennia. Local miners and artisans once quarried pigments from these very hills, and microscopic traces of Hormuz soils have been identified in Persian miniatures and ceramics, tying the geology directly to Iran's artistic legacy. Walking the ridgelines feels like tracing a geological painting, where wind, salt spray, and the slow geometry of erosion have blended minerals into surreal ribbons that change intensity as the sun moves. At low tide, the exposed flats reflect the colors in a shallow mirror, connecting the mountains visually to the glittering Strait of Hormuz and the shipping lanes that have linked continents for centuries. Generations of fishermen and traders used these chromatic landmarks to navigate, so the island's vivid palette also became a map of human movement, commerce, and cultural exchange across the Persian Gulf. From Hormuz's cliffs, you can make out Kasham's mangrove forests and the boats threading between islands, a reminder that these colors are part of a larger coastal ecosystem and maritime history. Village artisans still mix the colored mud into pigments and crafts, using techniques passed down through families, transforming geological waste into objects that carry both color and story. Increasing tourism and natural erosion now threaten those fragile slopes, prompting conservation efforts that balance local livelihoods with protecting the mineral palette that defines Hormuz. Scientists study the layered sediments here to reconstruct ancient sea chemistry and climate shifts, connecting Hormuz's tiny ridges to broader geological narratives stretching inland toward the Zagros Range. Persepolis rises on a low terrace overlooking the plain of Marvdasht, its ruins still whispering of imperial power. Do you know it was founded by Darius III in 518 BCE and served as a ceremonial capital, carved into the landscape for posterity? Walking beneath the surviving gateways, you confront reliefs that record the empire's reach and diversity. Every sculpted delegation, every procession, shows craftsmen who translated politics into monumental storytelling. The Apadana staircase alone presents hundreds of figures bearing tribute from lands as distant as India and Ethiopia. Look closely, and you will see tiny details: woven textiles, musical instruments, even traders' packages preserved in bas relief. The Hall of 100 Columns once held court in a space meant to impress both sight and memory. Although fire and conquest later damaged the complex, the intention behind its scale remains unmistakable. Nearby, the tomb of Darius and the rock-cut clusters at Naqsh-e-Rostam answer the city's funerary logic. Those giant royal chambers remind visitors that power here was designed to endure beyond a single lifetime. Persepolis stonework also reveals an astonishing ancient engineering. Beams precisely dressed to interlock without mortar. This craftsmanship links straight to the stone-cut tombs carved into the cliffs just kilometers away. As sunlight moves across the reliefs, different faces and inscriptions re-emerge, changing the narrative with the day. Epigraphs in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian testify to a multilingual empire negotiating identity through inscription. When you leave Persepolis, your next stop is often the quieter, more intimate Pasargade, where Cyrus's tomb anchors the origin story. That passage from monumental ceremony to the simpler royal grave completes a cycle of empire, memory, and place. On the shimmering coasts of the Persian Gulf, the Harra mangrove forests of Iran cradle one of the region's most extensive stands of Avicennia marina, creating a living coastline that filters seawater and shelters countless species. Do you know the Harra mangrove forests harbor nurseries where fish, crustaceans, and migratory birds find refuge amid tidal rhythms? Local fishermen still navigate narrow channels carved by centuries of ebb and flow, their knowledge tracing paths through mudflats and root mazes that satellite images cannot fully reveal. Beneath those roots, microscopic communities build the foundation for larger food webs, making Harra a crucial link between the open ocean and inland deserts. At low tide, the forest exposes a labyrinth of pneumatophores that feed oxygen to submerged roots, an adaptation that allows mangroves to survive saline stress and waterlogged soils. These black mangrove breathers support endangered species and visiting shorebirds that cross continents on migratory highways. Walk with a local guide, and you will hear the language of tides, the precise timing of boat departures, the songs that name distant birds, the recipes shaped by mangrove harvests. Each detail folds into the larger atlas of Iran's natural wonders, a corridor that leads from the hush of the mangrove canopy to the vibrant markets of nearby islands. In the next chapter, we trace that corridor, leaving the Harra routes for salt-washed cliffs and mineral paints, where human and geological histories paint the landscape in new colors. But before we move on, remember that every root, crab, and reed here plays a role in a chain that binds deserts and seas together across Iran's southern edge. Listen to the creak of mangrove bark and the hush of incoming tides, and you begin to understand why scientists, storytellers, and fishermen all stake claims to Harra's future. In protecting these roots, we protect a living archive, where nature and culture have coexisted on the brink of sea and sand for generations. Mount Taftan is Iran's only persistently active stratovolcano, its steaming fumaroles punctuating an otherwise sun-scorched plateau. Do you know Mount Taftan can host snowfields at its summit, while sulfurous vents hiss just meters away? Local shepherds and pilgrims navigate its flanks, where alpine grasses cling to volcanic scree, defying the surrounding desert. The mountain's twin peaks cast long shadows over basalt ridges, creating pockets of rare highland biodiversity in southeastern Iran. Cracks near the summit exhale mineral-rich gases that stain rocks vivid yellows and oranges, a living palette sculpted by heat. Geologists measure subtle tremors here. Taftan remains a reminder that tectonic forces quietly sculpt human histories and landscapes. In winter, its upper reaches shimmer with snow. In summer, fumaroles steam under a sky usually reserved for cacti and salt flats. This sharp contrast makes Taftan a geological paradox, an alpine volcano rising from an arid frontier. Ancient trade routes skirted its foothills, traders marking the mountain as both a landmark and an omen. Villages cluster where hot springs emerge, their water tapped for healing and ritual by generations who learn to read the mountain's moods. Botanists have cataloged endemic plants that cling to its volcanic soils, species you won't find in the lowlands. These hardy survivors reveal how life adapts, using heat and mineral richness where others cannot survive. From Taftan's ridgelines, the expanse of Sistan and Baluchistan unfolds, salt pans, folded ranges, and distant deserts. That view links the mountain to the vast Lut Desert, whose mirrored sands reflect the same tectonic stories on a different canvas. Climbing Taftan is both a physical journey and a passage through time, where human memory and molten earth intersect. Its steaming craters invite questions about how landscapes shape culture, commerce, and the very myths people tell. As night falls, thermal vents glow faintly under starlight, an otherworldly signal in a region often overlooked on maps. This is why Mount Taftan remains essential to any story of a restaurant's hidden geological wonders and a natural bridge to the deserts and coasts beyond. Kandovan in Iran is one of the world's rare inhabited villages carved directly into volcanic tuff cones that still shelter families today. Do you know Kandovan's mushroom-like houses were sculpted over centuries from the same ash and lava that built nearby Mount Shahdad? Walk its steep lanes, and you'll find smoke curling from stone chimneys that are part cave, part cottage, and entirely lived in. Those cone homes are naturally insulated, staying cool in searing summers and warm through bitter mountain winters without modern HVAC. Generations adapted to the rock, chiseling storage nooks, ovens, and alcoves, while preserving a layout that reads like geological architecture. Inside, low ceilings and thick walls tell stories of resourcefulness, where stone is both shelter and the pulse of daily life. Farm terraces cling to the slopes, and pomegranates, walnuts, and small gardens supply food, linking the village to the volcanic soil's fertility. Visit the small markets, and you'll hear languages and songs that carry mountain dialects, mixing hospitality with an unforced pride in place. From Kandovan, the journey can continue to Sahan's alpine meadows or descend toward other ancient settlements, each revealing another facet of Iran's rock heritage. In a country of deserts and gardens, Kandovan stands as a reminder that people will always find shelter in the most unlikely geologies. Its stone cones ask us to reconsider the boundary between nature's sculpture and human architecture, and how culture grows from rock. To leave Kandovan is to carry an impression of continuity, life threaded through eruptions, erosion, and centuries of careful adaptation. Silver Beach's shoreline is one of the few places on Earth where sand gleams like beaten silver, thanks to mica and salt crystals. Do you know Silver Beach's sand can shift from pale gold to gunmetal silver with the tide and the sun's angle? At low tide, the flats become sculpted mirrors, and tidal pools hold glassy life that seems lit from within. Fishermen thread shallow channels there, their small boats tracing calligraphy across the shimmering expanse. A fringe of mangroves knots the coast to inland waterways, filtering sediment and connecting this beach to a wider ecosystem. Walk those root-lined paths, and you'll find fossilized shells and mineral flecks that tell of ancient seas and shifting geology. Nearby islands wear colored soils, rust reds and ochres that feed the shoreline with tiny copper and iron grains. Those contrasting sediments arrive on the tide and puncture the silver with glints of warmth, a strange mineral diode. At dusk, flocks of migratory birds paint the surface with ripples, scattering the glitter into fleeting streaks of motion. Seasonal winds sculpt and erase dunes overnight, teaching visitors how quickly this coastline composes and undoes its own designs. Scientists and fishermen converge here, one group tracing mineral fingerprints, the other reading waves and winds by habit and eye. Their shared knowledge maps a landscape in motion, where every visit reveals a slightly different shore. From Silver Beach, a narrow ribbon of light seems to lead inland toward ochre cliffs and mineral-streaked valleys that explain the sand's odd luster. To stand on that shore is to witness a living exchange between sea, Isfahan, and Skiway, and to begin a journey that links coast to crater. Pilgrims of stillness come here at dawn to trace the shifting line where sea writes its name in silver. And each time they leave, they carry with them a handful of sand that refuses to be simple, every grain a small archive of place. Dasht-e Lut in Iran holds one of the highest ground surface temperatures ever recorded, its salt plains sculpted into molten-looking ridges by relentless wind and heat. Do you know that the same country that bears those furnace-like deserts gave Tehran an emblem, Azadi Tower, that fuses ancient Persian geometry with modern ambition? Rising about 45 meters above Azadi Square, The Marble Arch was conceived to mark only 500 years of Persian civilization and to stand as a monumental gateway to the capital. Designed by Hossein Amanat and completed in 1971, the tower was hewn from roughly 26,000 tons of white Isfahan marble and originally named Shahdad. After 1979, it was renamed Azadi, freedom, and its silhouette became a palimpsest of memory, reflecting changing narratives of power and people. An underground museum beneath the arch collects photographs, documents, and artifacts that trace Tehran's dramatic transformation from caravan junction to teeming metropolis. From its terraces, visitors scan the snow-capped Alborz Range, where geological time and human history meet in the city's skyline. The tower's intersecting curves and the four-arched Iwan echo motifs found in mosques and pre-Islamic reliefs, yet reworked on a civic scale. Curious details abound. Amanat was a young architect when he won the commission, and the tower's latticework hides subtle references to ancient Persian forms. Beneath Iran's central plateau lies Hoz-e Soltan, a salt lake whose seasonal floods paint a mosaic of neon pinks and metallic silvers as mineral concentrations shift. Do you know Hoz-e Soltan Salt Lake can shrink and swell by tens of kilometers between years, leaving ghostly salt flats that crack into geometric patterns under the sun? The lake's shallow margins host microscopic algae and brine shrimp that tint the water in colors so vivid they were once mistaken for chemical contamination. In low water, the exposed salt crust becomes an almost lunar landscape that reflects heat and refracts light in ways that confuse depth perception. Local nomads and salt workers navigate these changes with an instinct developed over generations, harvesting salt from ephemeral pools and reading weather in the stones. Birds, too, treat Hoz-e Soltan as a seasonal hub where flocks pause to feed on crustaceans before continuing long migrations across West Asia. Scientists study the lake for clues about past climates because its layered salts preserve a slow-motion diary of droughts and floods. In certain years, the lake's edges develop concentric salt ridges that, under low light, shimmer like rings of frozen mercury. To truly understand Hoz-e Soltan, is to watch it over seasons, to witness color shifts, the rise of salt blooms, and the slow migration of shorelines. Only then does the lake reveal why this slice of Iran's map is both a scientific archive and a fragile living artwork. Curiosity about its changing face compels travelers to come, and conservationists to ask how we can protect a place that rewrites itself each year. Hoz-e Soltan is not an isolated spectacle, but a chapter in a landscape where salt, sand, and stories meet, and where the next stop might be the wavering dunes leading to Varzaneh. Visitors who follow that rim find a continuity of color and texture that ties Iran's inland salt systems into one surprising ecosystem. And when you turn your face back to Hoz-e Soltan, you begin to see not just a salt plain, but a living map of water, wind, and time. Step into Hammam-e Sultan Mir Ahmad, and the contrast becomes a story written in tile and vapor. This 17th century bathhouse in Isfahan was more than a place to wash. It was a social engine where trade routes met ritual, and whispered negotiations often followed hot plunges. Beneath its domes, light pours through star-shaped skylights, fracturing into patterns on mosaic walls that speak to a geometry both mathematical and devotional. Engineered channels carried water from Kaluts and the Zayande river system, turning scarce desert bounty into a steady flow for the hammams, basins, and boilers. Inside, hypocaust-style heating warmed floors long before modern central heating, and the rhythm of steam and cold plunges became a ceremony of health and community. Look closely at the painted vaults, and you can read faded names and trader marks, trace the hands of craftsmen who built a civic memory in lime and brick. Hammam-e Sultan Mir Ahmad also sheltered storytellers, midwives, and fiats, knitting daily life into a public tapestry that connected caravanserais to city squares. Today, its restored chambers invite us to imagine how water made civilizations possible between blistering deserts and irrigated gardens, and how a bathhouse preserved both intimacy and empire. In that cool, echoing space, you can feel the pulse of Persian urban life, a quiet counterpoint to the extreme landscapes that surround the country. In contrast, the Jameh Mosque of Isfahan stands as a layered chronicle of Iran's architectural evolution, its stones bearing inscriptions from the 8th to the 20th century. Known locally as Masjid-e-Jameh, this congregational mosque is one of the oldest surviving examples of the 4-Iwan plan that would define Persian mosque architecture. Walking through its arched gateways, you pass successive courtyards and domed chambers that reveal Seljuk brickwork, Ilkhanid tile mosaics, and later, Safavid ornamentation, stitched together like a living museum. The mosque's western Iwan arches into a monumental domed sanctuary, where turquoise tiles and intricate muqarnas funnel sunlight into a kaleidoscope on the floor. The mosque's courtyard pavements bear worn footprints that map centuries of daily prayers, festivals, and political gatherings, each worn stone a savant witness. From here, narrow alleys unfurl toward the Zayandeh River and the surviving bridges of Isfahan, reminding visitors that sacred spaces were always part of a living city. For architects, the Jameh Mosque is a textbook in adaptation. Successive dynasties respected earlier geometries while adding their own rhythms of tile and light. To stand beneath its domes is to feel the continuity of Iranian cultural memory, a continuity that carries forward into the squares, mosques, and deserts that define the country's extraordinary landscape. The Kaluts of Shahdad are one of the planet's rarest wind-sculpted landscapes, with Yardang ridges towering over 100 meters and stretching in parallel corridors for tens of kilometers across the Lut Desert. Do you know the Kaluts of Shahdad were carved almost entirely by relentless wind rather than water? Their vertical faces and narrow alleys formed over millions of years. From dawn, the low sun paints the ridges in sharp relief, turning sand and clay into a skyline that looks more like a stone city than a desert. Travelers who walk its narrow passages report an uncanny silence, interrupted only by the whisper of grains that continue to polish those ancient walls. These formations are part of the Greater Lut Desert, itself famous for record-breaking ground temperatures, and yet here the sculpted Kaluts preserve clues to vastly different climates that once existed. And as we leave the ridges behind, our path bends toward the ancient caravan routes that once threaded these same alleys, connecting the Kaluts to Persian history. In that next chapter, we follow those caravan tracks toward ruined watchtowers and salt-cut tracks that still glint under the noon glare. Each marker ties the raw geology of the Kaluts to human journeys of trade, survival, and storytelling that span millennia. For now, remember the Kaluts as a wind-written manuscript. Every ridge a paragraph, every corridor a verse carved into Iran's oldest deserts. Their story is ongoing, sculpted by invisible hands, and it will guide us onward to the next remarkable landscape waiting just beyond the horizon. Mount Damavand rises to 5,610 meters as a colossal stratovolcano, Iran's highest peak and the tallest volcano in Asia. Do you know Mount Damavand still breathes, its summit crater exhaling sulfur-tinged steam that etches yellow bands into the snow and soil? Beneath that steaming crown lie rare high-altitude meadows where endemic alpine vine plants cling to volcanic scree, surviving fierce winds and thin air. The mountain's meltwater trickles into streams that split the country, running north toward the Caspian and south across the plateau. So Damavand literally stitches Iran's landscapes together. Herdsmen and shepherds have used its slopes for centuries, and small villages like Polur and Rene still serve as gateways for pilgrims and climbers. Local stories call Damavand the guardian of Tehran, and Persian myths bind its crags to heroes and monsters, making geology and legend inseparable here. Climbing Damavand is less an athletic record than a ritual. At high camp, the air thins, fumaroles steam, and the snow sometimes melts in ringed patterns around vents. Scientists watch those vents closely. Geologists measure gas emissions, and seismologists listen for subtle tremors that might change the mountain's mood overnight. The summit's landscape feels almost otherworldly. Black volcanic rock, patches of stubborn snow, and pools stained by mineral runoff. Below, ancient volcanic terraces host mineral springs whose warm waters have attracted healers and curious travelers for centuries. Birds and hardy mammals negotiate steep ravines, while wildflowers explode into color in short alpine summers, creating corridors of biodiversity that surprise many visitors. Rangers and conservationists now work to balance increasing tourism with fragile habitats that can be erased by careless boots and litter. From Damavand's flanks, the Alborz Range unfurls like a spine across northern Iran, linking this volcano to glacier-fed valleys and hidden lakes farther west. On exceptionally clear days, the silver grid of Tehran appears to the south, reminding climbers that this elemental mountain watches both rural life and modern cities. For geology, mythology, and simple human longing, Damavand is a hinge, a place where science, culture, and the rhythm of water meet. In the next segment, we'll follow one of its melt streams down into the Lar Valley and trace how that water shapes farms, forests, and the people who live there. The next descent follows a narrow river whose name changes with each valley, carrying stories and sediment toward the Caspian's humid rim. As we track that water, you'll see how Damavand's geology sculpts villages, gardens, and the very flavors of northern Iranian cuisine. From the sapphire mirror of Lake Urmia to the steaming, sculpted hollows of the Lut Desert, Iran stitches extremes into surprising neighbors. You will walk through imperial columns at Persepolis, and hours later, feel the cool silence of an ancient yakhchal that once stored ice in a desert. Isfahan's domes still catch light like painted coins, and a short drive brings you to the red-streaked tiles of Shiraz, where poets lie beneath cypress shadows. Yazd's wind catchers whisper 1,000-year solution to heat, while the Kaluts below carry life from mountain springs to parched plains. Higher up, the Hyrcanian forests preserve trees that watched the Ice Age recede, a green corridor that connects Iran to the Caspian's cool breath. South of those woods, the Zagros cradle nomads who read seasons by the lamb's cry, and the sky's thinness over Mount Damavand. If you leave with one question, let it be this: what other civilizations learned from Iran's key inventions, and what might the world relearn if we listened? Iran closes its chapters with surprises: mountain springs hidden between frozen peaks, deserts that shimmer with heat mirages, and mosques that bloom into color when sunlight passes through stained glass. Each surprise invites you not to tick boxes, but to slow down, to ask a local the story behind a tile or a river, and to let the country reveal itself slowly. When you step away, you carry more than photographs. You carry a map made of questions that will pull you back. Somewhere between the salted flats and the cedar forests, one last secret waits to undo everything you thought you knew about this ancient land.